Great. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at this inaugural Agri-Frontier Growth Hub launch. My name is Anu Menon and I'm a senior manager here at Agri-Frontier and also the facilitator for this event. We are so very proud to present Agri-Frontier's Growth Hub to you. The Growth Hub is a match-funded bespoke investment and agribusiness consulting supported by the Vitol Foundation. We're here to help agribusinesses strategize on how to improve their business financials, seek finance, and increase productivity. Today, we'll be spending 20 minutes where we introduce the Growth Hub on the application process, followed by a quick Q&A session on the same. Our second segment is where we speak to experts in the field of investment readiness and finding new markets. So our speakers today is George Mascharia, General Manager of Food and Agriculture from Equity Bank, Sarah Carr, Head of Farm 491, Keith Polo, Managing Director at Misso Invest, and Sebastian Wanjala, Head of Agribusiness Programs at AECF. So our panelist session will run for 30 minutes, and after which we'll conduct a quick Q&A session. So if you do have any questions during this introduction and also the questions for the panelist session, please write them down into our Q&A question box in your Zoom control panel, and I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation. So now, without further ado, it's a great pleasure that I introduce our presenters who will be taking us through the Agri-Frontier Growth Hub. Firstly is our Managing Director, Andrew Ritchie. He has had over 20 years experience in agriculture with a strong local network, with 15 years actually living and working in Africa. His previous roles included Group Finance Director at Finley's, Nairobi. He was an investment manager for Ultima Partners and a CFO at Mavuna Group in Kenya. Our other presenters are also George Kenyeki. He's a senior agribusiness expert. He has 8 years experience in agribusiness investment, corporate finance, and also financial analysis. We also have Penina Warura, a senior agribusiness expert too, and our Growth Hub manager actually. Penina has over 6 years experience in corporate finance and investment analysis, and was previously with the Kenyan Climate Innovation Center in Nairobi. So before they start the presentation, a reminder again, do send in your questions into the Q&A box and we'll try to get through them at the end of the session. So over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Annie. Now, for those that don't know it, before introducing the Growth Hub, we'll present a few slides introducing Agri-Frontier. So we are an agri investment and advisory firm. We specialize only in the agri sector across all agriculture value chains. We support input and service providers, primary producers, aggregators, processors, and agri-tech enablers. We basically support from farm to fork. We started our operations in Kenya, based at the Crop Nut Center, and now support all the East African countries, including Ethiopia, and also down to Mozambique, Zambia, and Malawi. In West Africa, we are based in Ibadan, in Nigeria, at the IITA headquarters, supporting Nigeria, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. We provide a range of business consulting, investment, and HR services, all geared towards the agri sector. A lot of our work relates to supporting the strategic development of companies, raising finance and investment, and helping companies to grow. Some examples include commercial feasibility studies for setting up, say, macadamia and avocado plantations, linking companies with new regional and export markets, helping aggregators and processors with expansion finance, helping to identify senior management gaps and recruitment of the same. Now, as you know, small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are the backbone to economies the world over. However, the problem we see in our work, day in, day out, is that these SMEs are too large to raise sufficient finance and microfinance, and yet are too small to secure funding from impact investors, DFIs, and commercial banks, who all flock towards lower risk, large ticket size investments. We call this the missing middle, also referred to as the funding gap. Companies that are large with solid balance sheets and proven cash flows generally have no problem raising finance. Very small early stage businesses are also well supported by the huge success and growth in microfinance. It is this missing middle we see as most in need of support, and it is this size of business which the Agri Growth Hub will support. This size of business is also least able to afford professional support, and there is a challenge in finding quality and assured technical assistance. Women and youth in particular lack the support and confidence to grow their business, and there are high costs associated with expanding into new markets. It is our focus for the Growth Hub to help address these challenges. And George Kanyeki, who will explain how the Growth Hub can help you.
Thank you, Andy, for that introduction. I will be taking us through a couple of slides highlighting how the Growth Hub will support SMEs. The Agri Growth Hub will provide personalized and specialized business support for sustainable growth. And our aim is to help these SMEs become investment ready, improve their governance systems, provide access to funding and business development to expand to regional and international markets. So key to note is that these services have been subsidized through our funding partner, Vitol Foundation, to enable us reach the missing middle SMEs. Our support process will be carried out in 3 levels. So initially at a pre-funding level, secondly during the fundraising or capital raising process, and lastly post-fundraising support. Next slide, please. At a pre-funding level, this will entail services to SMEs prior to their fundraising journey and will help guide their business strategies to promote organic and sustainable growth. And some of the services under this stage will include investment readiness, business planning, financial modeling, corporate governance, agronomy capacity building, among others. After providing pre-funding support, then these SMEs raise equity or debt finance. And this will be through a process starting at a development of a capital raising plan, advice on right capital structure, identifying suitable and interested investors, managing the negotiation process, review of term sheets through to completion. Following successful fundraising, we will then provide post-investment support to help SMEs execute the identified strategies and scale up. And this will involve mentorship and coaching, identification of management gaps and recruitment of the same, improvement of reporting systems, among others. In terms of the value chains that we support, we work across the entire value chain and support actors that are directly involved in inputs, produce, processing, and are also involved in marketing and distribution activities. And some of these actors will include, at an input level, we have providers of seed, chemicals and fertilizers, irrigation equipment, among others. Primary production will include farming and livestock production, and some of the actors operate in agroforestry, horticulture, oil seeds, grains, beef, dairy and beef production, among others. At the post-harvest level, we will support actors that are involved in aggregation, milling operations, marketing, trading, and among others. And lastly, we cannot overemphasize the importance of agri-tech, as this cuts across the entire value chain and is a support service or an enabler to SMEs or actors and helps to improve efficiencies at the primary production or processing levels. And the above list is not exhaustive. What we encourage is for SMEs that are operating in the agri value chain to apply, and we will continue with our evaluation. I would now like to invite Penina Warora, our Growth Hub lead, to take us through the next slides. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, George, for that good introduction about our services. Moving on to our impact, so Agri Frontier Growth Hub will aim to support 110 businesses by 2025 Out of these enterprises, 30 will be young entrepreneurs, and 50% of these businesses will have at least one woman founder or a woman in their senior team. We will assist these enterprises increase their net income by 2.5 times through increasing their production and yield by 50%. We will also enable these enterprises create new jobs with over 1,500 jobs created, and these businesses will contribute to the climate mitigation and climate adaptation. For enterprises to be eligible for a support in the Agri Frontier Growth Hub, these enterprises must be within the agribusiness value chain. They have to be in operation for over 3 years, must have a proven concept, must have at least 2 years of audited activity. These enterprises must also be operating in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, Malawi, Zambia, and Nigeria. So to apply, these enterprises are requested to kindly visit our website or send us an email. Our team at Growth Hub, we are experienced with over 30 years of experience in agri-finance and investment consulting. We are led by our director, Andrew Lichi, and myself, Penina Aurora, the hub manager. And we are also supported by George Kanyeki, Masi Dunge, and Stevie Moshiru. So our services are complemented by Farm 491 and Crop Nuts. Farm 491 is a UK-based leading technological incubator focused on future of farming and food system. Crop Nut is also an agronomic advisory with a wide range of experience with various crops. Our support will not be, we will not be able to provide our support without the support of funding we have received from Vitol Foundation, who has enabled us to provide subsidized business advisory. So Vitol Foundation supports solutions that improve quality performance, promote greater inclusion, catalyzes access to finance to bring a long-lasting sustainable growth. Thank you. I'd now like to hand it over to Anu, who will take us through the next session of question and answer.
Thank you so much, Penina. Thank you also to Andrew and George for that introduction to the Growth Hub. So we have a couple more minutes before we move on to our Q&A session. So please start sending in your questions into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. So as the team mentioned, we at the Growth Hub, we're so passionate about scaling up the missing middle agribusinesses. So if you are an agribusiness that has been in operation for more than 3 years with a proven concept and audited accounts, so please feel free to submit your application online or just email us and we can have a chat about how to move forward. So I can see a question has come through. This is from Stephen. So other than the application form, what other documentation should I submit? I think, Penina, would you like to answer that?
Yes, after application, no other document is required. In case we need any document from the enterprises, we will request the documents. Yeah.
Great. Brilliant, another one. This is from Farida. Will you be extending the program to Francophone West African countries too? If yes, when, please? I think, Andy, this is a question for you.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a very good question. Short answer is yes, we will be. At the moment, we can't go live in every country all at the same time. We are already, as Agri Frontier, active in Côte d'Ivoire, and our intention is to expand more. But yes, Francophone countries, not immediately, but I would say, you know, come back in 1 year's time, and by then, I think we will be there.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Another question from Stephen. When will I hear about the outcome of my application? And Penina, this is for you.
We will aim to respond to all applications within the shortest time period, but for all applications, we have given every enterprise feedback within 2 weeks and started engaging with the enterprises.
That answers your question, Stephen. We have another question from Mohammed. Could you kindly clarify regarding subsidy? Will SMEs require to contribute? And if so, what are the matching rates? And Andrew, I think this is for you.
Yeah, so basically we have relatively flexible charging process. It's 50-50 matching rates. Now we recognize that SMEs are least able to afford these services, as we mentioned before, and so even the 50% matching the SMEs required to provide, that can be in more innovative terms. For example, it could be success-based when it comes to raising finance, and in the form of, say, market linkages, it could be in the form of increased turnover, and again, success-based. So basically, all the matching will be milestone-based, success-based, basically to match the increased performance of the SME as well.
Mohammed, if you need more information, do feel free to reach out to us at our email address. Great, thank you. We've got another question from Harrison. Are there some farmer organizations that you currently support in Uganda? Andrew, it's a question for you also.
We work with farmer organizations in many countries. We've worked a lot in Uganda. We're always very happy to work with farmer organizations and their members. Our funding doesn't directly support the farming organization themselves, but I think if in doubt, the best thing is to apply, and then let's organize a call, and then let's just explore and see how we can help you.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, and thank you, Harrison, for that question. Okay, we don't have any other questions, but if anyone does have more questions, please feel free to email us at any time, and we can, one question has come through from Duncan. So this is Duncan from GAIN. We have a program supporting agri-food SMEs in 17 SSA countries in technical assistance. I think it would be good to engage further to establish areas of collaboration. Absolutely, Duncan. I do feel that there is a lot of synergies there, so we will be in touch, definitely. If you could just email us and we will be in contact. And
it sounds very interesting, Duncan. Yeah, we'd love to engage. So the invitees to this session today was a mixture of SMEs as well as organizations such as yourself that are involved with many SMEs and programs. So yes, we'd love to have a chat.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you all to the attendees who have sent in their questions. It was very interesting. We'll now move on to our panelist session. So our main topic for today is basically investment readiness. It's about preparing yourself and preparing the answers that investors would like to ask during the pre-due diligence stage. And this obviously includes proposals, pitch decks, investment teasers, the financial models and financial projections, and financial statements. So in our line of work, obviously, we see how challenging it is for businesses to raise capital, and even good businesses struggle at it. So it'd be great to speak to our panelists today to really understand the crux and the challenges that the missing middle SMEs face. So let me first start by introducing our speakers. So we have George Mascharia. General Manager for Food and Agriculture at Equity Bank. So Equity Bank has been recognized by the Kenyan Bankers Association in 2021 for its efforts in championing sustainable finance initiatives. And they even clinched the top position in the best bank for the COVID-19 response and the best bank in SME financing awards category. So George is very well positioned to talk from the banking point of view for the missing middle challenges. We also have Keith Polo, Managing Director at Misso Invest. So Keith joined Misso Invest in 2019. Prior to that, he led the agribusiness development ventures in both private and development sectors. So this included a business advisory transaction firm called Envision Ag, which he started. He also worked at Cultivating New Frontiers in Agriculture, CNFA Capital, and worked in commercial agribusinesses in Malawi and Tanzania. He was also the director of agriculture development in Mercycorp for 10 years, where he led the operations in more than 35 countries. So welcome, Keith. Next, we have Sarah, the head of Farm 491. Sarah leads Farm 491. They build out partnerships, commercial initiatives to help UK's agri-tech ecosystem grow. They promote adoption of new technologies in food production. She often mentors early stage agri-tech startups through the program, such as Thrive SVG Ventures, and is a regular entrepreneur in residence at the EIT Food Seedbed program. She also sits on various committees, such as the G1st Lab Agri-Food and Rural Business Groups, where she assists in the development of and implementation of country-wide strategies. So it's great to have you here, Sarah. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Sebastian Wanjala, Head of Agribusiness Programs at AECF. Sebastian has over 18 years experience in the design and implementation of projects in development and post-conflict environments, with a large chunk of his career being spent in advisory services, spanning dairy, horticulture, and crop services. Prior to joining AECF, he worked in SNV Netherlands Development Organization, where he served as the Kenyan country program manager. So thank you for being here, and a big welcome to all our speakers today. So as a reminder, if you do have any questions, feel free to enter them in the question box. And if it's directly directed to a certain panelists, do list their name there too. We will go through the Q&As at the end of the panel. So if we could go around first through the room and ask each panelist to spend a couple of minutes to introduce what their organization does and how they support SMEs. So George, maybe we can start with you. What does Equity Bank do, and how do you support SME agribusinesses?
Thank you very much, Anu, and my apologies. I've joined the webinar quite late. I was caught up in another meeting. At some point, I thought the webinar is over, but I'm happy to be here. I will switch off my camera for clarity of the network. But thank you for having me here, and pleasure meeting all the participants in this webinar. My name is George Mascharia, just as highlighted, and I work with Equity Bank. And I think to say Equity Bank, of course, is a financial institution headquartered in Kenya, but the operates across the whole of East Africa. We are in 6 countries, and also with a representative office in Ethiopia. Equity Bank, or I say Equity Group, has several subsidiaries, so financial and non-financial subsidiaries, both which do commercial business, but also a foundation that invest in social and environmental, investments. That includes, but not limited to, health, agriculture, education, and also taking care of the environment. of importance to note is that as equity, we operate across the entire spectrum of the value chains, but also importantly across economic segments. And I think I will have an opportunity probably to later on say what we do with the SMEs, but happy to be in this forum. And I hope that is the introduction that you've asked me to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you. So how does Equity Bank actually help support Agri SMEs in particular?
Thank you very much. Let me start from highlighting something that is of importance, that as Equity Group, we have realized the importance of food and agriculture. For us, we call it food and agriculture, and deliberately so. For the longest, we were only focusing on agriculture, but we realized that if you only focus on agriculture, then you leave a lot of players along the value chain. But of importance to also note is that at the group level, we have developed what we have called blooded Africa Recovery Resilience Plan, or the Marshall Plan, that is generally meant to support businesses and entrepreneurs to be able to go beyond the challenges that have emanated from COVID pandemic the last 2 years, but also followed by the crisis that we have seen, which have affected generally the global economies. We talk about Ukraine-Russia war, speak about the depreciating currencies and the fluctuations that we are seeing, cost of doing business, and so on. And our Marshall Plan has decided to focus on businesses in Africa to be able to spur growth, but also to make them resilient in a way that in the event that such kind of occurrences happen in the future, then businesses will be able to restart. So we've picked 6 pillars out of that to be able to support our Marshall Plan. And the first one is agriculture and extractive sectors. And in this case, we are talking about primary agriculture, but also extraction and basically mining. We have said that we would want to really support both producers at the small scale level, medium scale and large scale plantations to be able to enhance their productivity, but also importantly to be able to invest in technologies that can be able to withstand the test of time, whether it is about climate change, whether it's about input adequacy and sufficiency, to be able to support that. The second thing that we have, or rather pillar that we have picked, is manufacturing, on realization that Africa and our region, to be precise, has been exporting primary raw materials for value addition outside its geography. And we asked ourselves, when you primary raw materials to other nations, they go add value and send them back, in a value-added way. We do to our economy, and so we realize that is an area that we really need to intervene on. Basically, what it means is that we would want to work with the SMEs, whether at the cottage level or huge investments, to be able to develop manufacturing and value addition plans, and that is very important for us. The other pillar that we have looked at is trade and investment, on realization that upon value adding, we need people or entities and enterprises that can actually be able to move these commodities to where they are supposed to go. And this is actually enhancing trade. And that we have coupled with the fourth pillar, which is support of MSMEs. And the reason why we are doing this is largely because we want to participate in for the local regional governments and even Kenya government, where we are headquartered, as I said, to be able to push employment creation. And we have partnered with like-minded people to be able to see, including the government, to see how we can be able to promote MSMEs so that they can create, for us, our goal is to create 25 million jobs by supporting 5 million MSMEs. And saying out of every MSME that we support, can they create 5 jobs each, and we be able to develop 25 million jobs in that journey. The last pillar is social investment, where we are saying we would want all these businesses that I've spoken about in the 4 pillars to be able to have the social positivity, but also importantly to be friendly to the environment. In fact, what we've done is to also support that because we are also, if you know what you may call a commercial entity, we've also said we would want to also support the environment, and equity group, we've decided to plant 35 million trees in the next 4 years. And this is something that we've really focused on, supporting institutions, state entities, education or institutions to be able to get free tree seedlings so that they can be able to protect the environment. Now, when it comes directly then to the SMEs, and I think that is important for me to just highlight, we support all financial requirements, whether it is capital investment, whether it is expansion to other geographies or expansion of the business scales, but also we work very closely with our foundation, Equity Group Foundation, to be able to do capacity building and training of these entrepreneurs. We have a specific pillar within the foundation that is meant to offer financial education and entrepreneurship so that we can create sustainability in these businesses, but also create professionalism in these businesses. And lastly, offering payment that are digitized so that then we make movement of money easy for these MSMEs, so that as they make their payments, then they can be able to do it in an efficient way. Thank you. Back to you, Anna.
That's really.
I know I have summarized. I may not have given you all the details because of time, but yeah, I hope that makes it clear. Yeah.
No, that was a great overview actually of everything that Equity Bank does, and I love how holistic everything is, and you've thought about all the different elements that an SME needs. So amazing, and I've taken some very good points here to bring it up later in our discussion. So thank you so much for that. Keith Polo from Misso Invest. Keith, so what does Misso Invest do, and how do you support SMEs in Africa? And I'm sure that there is some element of what George has just mentioned in terms of the resilience coming through where you're supporting your SMEs too. So what from your experience, what do you do, and how do you support SMEs?
Sure, thank you, Anu. Well, your presentation from Agri Frontier and what George has just mentioned certainly resounds well with our reality on the ground. Misso Invest is an impact investor. We manage a $40 million impact investment fund. But a bit uniquely, we're primarily focused on supplying finance and advisory to Catholic Church-run social enterprises. That may sound different or strange even to some folks, but you'd be surprised that in every location all across Africa on the continent, there are 550 dioceses everywhere that run around 70,000 schools. These are run as social enterprises, provide 30 to 35% of healthcare services to Africans everywhere, and is arguably the largest private non-governmental farmland owner on the continent, and thus are running thousands of agribusiness SMEs, all at varying degrees of development. We do debt financing, only debt financing. There really are no exits, so to speak, in the Catholic Church space, because these are very, very long-term investments that are aimed at creating deep local impact, as I mentioned, in the education sector, healthcare sector, and food nutrition via the agribusiness SMEs. Half of our portfolio is agriculture, so we know it well. We currently operate in 10 to 11 countries and plan to expand, well, everywhere, because the church is everywhere. We definitely operate on that, probably the lower end of the missing middle spectrum. So as you termed it, I think it was startup to early stage. That's our space. We give loans from 50,000 USD up to 1 million. So we have a wide range of flexibility in terms of the size of loans, the tenors. We do a significant amount of pre-financing work with the entrepreneurs. There's a significant amount of work done on business strategy development, financial projections, focusing on what the strengths are of that particular enterprise, the team, and so on. And that's where we've brought in AgriFrontier in a few key instances in several countries across Africa. So that's what Misso Invest does. We currently have a portfolio of around 60 loans in East, Southern, and West Africa, about 12, 13 million in outstanding loans now, and that keeps growing every year. I think further in the panel, we'll talk about some of the challenges and some of the approaches that we use to address those challenges in the marketplace, but also with the SMEs and some of our FM players.
Great. I think the challenges are definitely something that is becoming more prominent now with all these world issues. So yes, definitely we'll have to catch up on that later on. Moving on to Sarah. Sarah, so if you could give a quick update on what Farm 491 does and how do you support agtech businesses within UK?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anu. So I'm Sarah, I head up Farm 491, and we're the Royal Agricultural University's Agri-Tech Incubator. That doesn't mean that we support only university spin-outs or students. We work with startups across the UK and even internationally as well. So we run as a membership organisation. We're very founder friendly. We don't take equity. We're purely here really to provide that support. And how it works is our members pay us a monthly fee. But with that, they get access to a whole range of different levels of support. So it's available to all of them. And examples of that support would be one-to-one business advice. So we have a team of around, 7 business advisors, and their skills all range from one's an investor, one's a founder of a very large food subscription company, one's an agribusiness expert, one's a change management and business consultant, and one again is another agribusiness and sales expert, as well as being a business coach. So it's all these different skills that our businesses can tap into whenever they want, arrange their one-to-ones, whether that's building their strategy, looking for contacts, or just general advice and having someone to bounce ideas off. On top of that, we run a number of different events. So again, to access, the different companies we work with across the UK and internationally, a lot of these are online, and they were pre-COVID anyway. So we'll often run online sessions on business planning, webinars around how to get funding, best sources of finance, how to deliver a pitch, all the sort of things that you need as a startup. But in addition to that, we do run physical events such as showcases, and again, in-person workshops, whether that's exploring business tools or even exploring other avenues within the sector, such as cybersecurity, marketing, anything that's really relevant. And then in addition to that, which I think is why a lot of companies join us, is we do have, it's a small pool, it's around 40 contacts of investors, and they are sort of agri-tech specific investors. I say agri-tech, I think for us that sort of covers a lot of different types of tech and types of businesses. A lot of people will assume that means on-farm technology, but actually that really can span throughout the whole food chain. So we can be looking at products on farm, but we could also be looking at alternative proteins or vertical farming, or anything further down the food supply chain. So anything really that works on the future of food and farming, food tech, climate tech, ag tech. So they're the sorts of companies that we work with. And then also we've got our network, that includes the academics who are on site at the university. It includes people like Andy as well, if we can put them in touch with Andy and he can give that advice on the African markets. So it's all these different contacts we have. And the great thing is that it's not so structured that businesses have to go through a certain structure of support with us. So you can join at any point in your journey and access any of that support you need whenever you want. So we're sort of different to a few other incubators and accelerators. We don't have specific cohorts every few months. It's just a continuous rolling membership, and we help each company individually. So it's quite bespoke. And I think that's needed in the agri-tech space, and specifically looking at agri-tech companies, they all require different levels of support because the market is so, it's not linear, it's so backwards and forwards. You can think you have a product ready to go out to market, you get it on farm and actually it doesn't work properly and the customer's not happy. You need to bring it back. And it's very, the process can be very, very long. So that's why we like to be flexible. And that's the approach that we think suits best for agri-tech companies. So hopefully that's a good overview.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And I think the challenge with agri-tech is also it's wide across so many value chains that that there's so much overlap also. But it's a very up and coming and very interesting field to be in. So very happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Finally, we move on to Sebastian from AECF. Sebastian, what does AECF do and how do they work with SMEs?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Anu. Since 2008, AECF has existed to do one thing, really. It's basically provide patient capital, and technical assistance to SMEs in agribusiness and renewable energy. So we raise capital mostly from donor sources, and then we deploy this capital to SMEs that have specific solutions that will solve resiliency problems and increase livelihoods for specific segments across Africa. So all those years we've invested in 375 SMEs in that missing middle space. In grants and in certain instances in repairable grants. So where does our role stop and where the likes of AgriFrontier start? So patient capital has a role in sort of building these businesses, especially if they're startups or they have an innovative idea that needs market testing or piloting, or there are some locations where we want a solution to reach rural communities, but then the risk is just too high. So we will de-risk such businesses. But a point comes where grants are no longer tenable, or where these businesses require commercial lending. But most of these businesses are not well structured, to receive commercial capital. And this is where we've worked with AgriFrontier quite successfully in the past few years to raise capital, to prepare these businesses for that commercial capital, and not only for commercial capital, even for potential grant funding, just to take them to another level. One of the challenges we've found over the years we worked with SMEs is just structuring their businesses for funding. And this is your strength. We can do it, but that's your core business. So I hope I've answered your question about what we do and how we've partnered. Thank you, Anu.
Thank you, Sebastian. So just working off those challenges that you face, what are the head blocks or challenges you see the missing middle SMEs missing a lot of the time in terms of income, in terms of fundraising and coming up with the capital?
Thank you. Several, actually. The first thing is the way the businesses are structured. Majority of these businesses start off as family businesses. And so they're owned by the founders, and they're so limited in the way they think. Well, I shouldn't say this in a negative manner, but it's just the way, the breadth, the bench strength. Let me just say the bench strength in their management capability. That's number one, just the people within the business. Secondly, just realizing those opportunities in specific value chains. Businesses will set up, for instance, for value addition, and they don't see perhaps that if they are more vertically integrated, they would earn more. Lastly, is just the way they've structured their financials. We believe that, profit is king. However, profit is not king. Cash flow is king. And so you need a business to be structured in a way in which that cash flow is really consistent enough to attract higher levels of finance. And this is not a strength that most SME businesses have, and that limits their visibility to commercial lending. And this is one area where I believe you do a great job in just structuring that balance sheet, helping the businesses vision better, identify opportunities that entrepreneurs are not seeing, and then direct them to affordable finance. Thank you.
I think that's a great point in terms of commercial lending and trying to get the businesses to that level. George, this is something that you face at Equity Bank, the challenges that these type of family-run agribusinesses come to you. They're good businesses, but maybe they lack a little bit of structure. Is there something that you're seeing in terms of commercial lending and the problems there for businesses?
Thank you again. I think I resonate, or the challenges that Sebastian has talked about actually resonate with what we see with the SMEs, and through to and I think I almost am repeating what. Most of these SMEs are, family-owned businesses that have grown beyond, or which should ideally have grown beyond the family. The issue of corporate governance has actually killed so many SMEs in this market, and largely because of very interesting scenarios that when you look at the business coming down, you wonder how is it that this could actually be mitigated, and it definitely then boils down to capacity building on corporate governance, trying to see how then they can be able to help or rather the companies can actually be able to withstand issues that do not directly relate to the business, separate them, and can be able to create proper structures that say this is how our business will run, and it is independent of our business or rather our family affairs or our social affairs, and therefore become sustainable. The other thing, if you allow me to add a couple of other challenges that we've seen with these SMEs, is the issue of clarity of their goals and the clarity of their strategy, and lastly on the same, the issue of a very clear roadmap of those strategies and goals will actually be executed and achieved. We see most of the SMEs that we work with almost doing what you call scenario management, where today if a certain factor changes, which is important, yes, but if a factor in their business changes, then they sporadically have to look for solutions. But importantly, then they lack that of, even though you have in some instances have to deal with what I would call a scenario aspect or approach, is it possible for them then to be able to have long-term approach? I think that is something that we've seen really lacking in most of these businesses. The third thing is on the financial management aspect. And when I talk about challenges on financial management, it is two-pronged. There is the aspect of doing it because they lack the full information or knowledge, so they erroneously maintain the wrong financial data or records, but also the intention to run away from regulators and taxman and so on, and thereby maintaining books that are not what the true position of the company or their businesses is. And what then that means is that when you receive those audited financials that are misrepresenting the true position of the business, then as a commercial leader, then you use those financials and you limit the lending companies, because whatever information you have is not adequate. That's another challenge. My other challenge that we have seen with SMEs is in terms of understanding, but even where they understand, not being able to pre-contract their markets. Being able to know that I produce a certain product in my company. How do I approach the market? Yes, I know it is part of the strategy, but a very significant thing that agribusiness companies are actually able to produce, able to process, able to package, but sometimes they do not know how to combat the market aspect. Unfortunately, the same market that I'm talking about is also coupled with the competition that they are not able to go beyond, because maybe the scale of their product doesn't allow them to manage their costs. And so when they are getting into their other alternatives or to the off-taker that their goal or their targeting to give or to sell their products to. Lastly is the aspect of climate change, which has really affected businesses. And I think this is something that, yes, the SMEs, but it's a challenge that they are really and probably it's a call to enterprises and big companies and organizations to see how then some of the issues could be tackled, because it cannot be tackled by one SME on its own. It is more of a bigger corporate agenda that would require a wide approach. But generally, those are some of the challenges that we see. And of course, as a leader, some limitations on them being able to raise collaterals for securing their. I think those are some of the highlights that I would give in as far as challenges are concerned.
Yeah, so I think overarchingly, it's basically the financial structure, the roadmap, the strategy. Having all that in place is very critical. Keith, is that something that you look at when you are analyzing SMEs that come to you for fundraising?
Sure, thank you. Oh yes, very much so. We get in the deep weeds with every SME we finance in terms of trying to problem solve and plan. In terms of the challenges that we see out there, well, Sebastian and George mentioned some of the most prominent ones, and I'll just reiterate those and then add some new points to the conversation. But the management structure, you want to call it corporate governance, that's fine too, but oftentimes in these SMEs you have many key persons, in many cases doing too much, doing too many, wearing too many hats. One may be the manager, but then also the accountant, Also the farm manager, things like that. So that's an issue. The team structure, management decision-making. Do they have a structure where they have monthly financials coming in, then business meetings every month for decision-making, evaluating, planning in the future? Those are all pretty prominent and common challenges or weaknesses that we see in the SMEs. So we try to, work through each client to help them strengthen that. Specifically on the financial reporting, that's typically all over the board. Sometimes you will get some SMEs that can give you 2 to 3 years historical financials, sometimes audited. In other cases, no. They've got to piece it together. And so that's always an area that is a weak point that we spend a lot of pre-investment time on, working with the client to understand their historicals to then inform the future planning for, before the financing that we would give. I think recently, inflation and currency fluctuations is a big challenge out there across the board. We even see it in Kenya now, which is a bit odd since the shilling has been quite stable for many years. But dealing with inflation pressures and those currency fluctuations is a new challenge in a lot of locations that I think the smaller SMEs struggle with, to have that resilience, which you mentioned, Sebastian. And good planning and realistic, pragmatic financial projections is key there. I think with a lot of operators in the ag space, well, many of us have probably been farmers or worked in agribusiness, and it's a real temptation to do nice, optimistic financial projections going forward. We always think we're going to produce 20 liters per cow, in a dairy, but in reality, you're probably ending up at 10 or 12. Things like that, accurate planning. Related, I think focus on strengths, that can be a challenge of SMEs too, particularly in the ag sector. We see at least a lot of SMEs wanting to try to do 5, 6, 7 different business units on their farm or in their agribusiness, when maybe they'd be better served focusing on 2 to 3. That's one area where we've brought in AgriFrontier several times to help us focus, help that client focus on what they're good at and what the market demands are out there and where they can be most successful. And speaking of that, I think a lot of the smaller SMEs have some weaknesses on their market engagement and market intelligence, simply understanding market demand out there for the products they may produce or process. That can be a weakness. And also we see almost invariably, now all of us are well connected. We know who to go to if we need assistance on the input side or the output market side. But a lot of these folks are so local, which is a strength, being so local and being integrated in the community. But oftentimes they don't know if they have a challenge where to go to. Maybe they can go to the extension officer, but they may not have all of those contacts within the larger market space. And then finally, I think communication writ large, how to communicate with an investor or a financer, that's new space for a lot of the SMEs, how to communicate timely. Now, on our team, we more or less have an unwritten rule. We always respond within 24 hours, max 48 hours. That can be up and down with some of these SMEs. It can take a week or 2 weeks. They have other priorities and so on. So that can send an investment process off track if those communications aren't in sync. So we try to work through that, and that's linked to that management structure as well. So those are a few of the highlights, I'd say.
That's really good. I think that's very practical. I think a lot of people talk about very high level things, but you've just kind of talked about the very practical nitty-gritty. This is exactly what we need on the ground. So that's really clear. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah, well, I'll just add one more thing. You know, it's the thing we talk about on our team, and we're 90% local. We have country investment managers in each country and just work locally. But one thing we always talk about, what is innovation? And this is a cue to you next, Sarah, I suppose. But in our space, we view innovation as getting the job done well on the ground and making a successful social enterprise, try to hit all of those impact boxes, turn a profit, well managed, have financial reporting. I know that sounds basic, but when that works, that's innovation right there on the local ground. We feel, even though it may sound simple, it's not always easy to do.
I think for Africa and the challenges that they have, I think it's important to have this place, and it is innovation in a way because it creates that structure. And Sarah, from your UK perspective, you've raised almost 30 million for your members. Does that innovation and that structure come into place when you're helping your members?
Yeah, totally. And definitely echo what Keith just said. It does sound really basic, but without that, you can't be considered innovative or then innovate even further. So certainly when our members are looking to raise investment, it's even simple things like, can you tell me what you do in a sentence? Because the amount of times I've sat down and had, a 45-minute, I was about to say, not really, it's not a conversation, to be honest. It's them talking at me, telling me what they do, and it makes no sense. It's full of technical jargon, and we can't all be experts in all areas in this whole massive value chain. So it's something simple like that. Can you pitch to me in one sentence or a few minutes? So it's things like that to get going. And then from there, you can really start to build that clear structure. I think going back one question as well on those challenges, which fits into this question too, it's that skills gap. So what skills are you missing in your team? A huge challenge for SMEs in the missing middle, because they're sort of put into this box, but how do they grow out of it? How do they get the right people on board? How do they make people want to join their team? And again, that's really important when you're raising money, because investors need to see what gaps you have. There's no point hiding it, because it'll come out at some point and it won't be good news. So obviously, if Keith agrees, he's the investment expert here, but I think saying quite clearly, these are the gaps we have and we'd like to use this money to fill those gaps is really important to get out of that missing middle gap as well. So yeah, and I think another point on raising the investment, what we ensure our members do is have a clear roadmap. Again, going back to basics, even if that's a simple visual, this is what we want to use the money for over the next however many months. This is what we will need in 18 months time, and this is where we will be. So is it getting you from A to B, or is it getting you from A to wherever else? Really understanding that growth and how you're going to use that money is just so important. And again, some SMEs don't have a clear understanding of that, which you'd assume they do, but they've got some sums in their head. They sort of know roughly what they want to do with it, but is that really good enough for an investor? Is that going to get them a return? Are they going to see enough growth? And are they going to see enough innovation as well in this sector? I think innovation really has to be key. Otherwise, we'll just carry on doing the same things we've been doing for the past however many years. And so these new ideas are really important. And then finally, a point around the investment, I think for me is competition. I think, again, when you're considered an innovative company, it's very easy for these startups and these SMEs to say, oh, we don't have any competitors, but it's just not the case. There's always going to be someone doing something similar or something totally different. However, it's almost opposite to what you're offering. So to explain that, what I mean is, for example, if you are working in regenerative agriculture and you're promoting this service or product that promotes that, your competitor is actually traditional agriculture, so the normal way of doing things. So again, that's just something that we really push out there, is don't always assume that you don't have competitors, even if you can't find an obvious fit. there will always be a competitor of some sort. So yeah, we really bang that drum.
In terms of African SMEs looking to expand or move to the UK to find new markets, what would be your advice to them and how would they go about it?
Yeah, I think my main advice would be, and again, it sounds simple and basic, but would be the market research. So really know who your customers are. I think we can all agree that in this industry, customers can be a challenge. There's a lot of barriers to adoption. There's a lot of trust in this industry. And so, you know, especially if you're not based within a certain country already, you need to fully understand how your customers work. So are a lot of their transactions based on trust? Are they based on relationships they've already formed with companies, you know, over the past 50 years? So really understand who the customer is, what sort of makes them tick, what will make them buy your product, and what makes you stand out as well. So they're really the key ones that we look at, because otherwise, if you're going to try and expand into another country, you don't really know who your customer is. It's clearly not going to go very smoothly. You're going to face a lot of bumps in the road, but also you'll just have a lot of barriers in terms of the adoption, because, you know, a farmer, for example, would think, well, why would I choose you? I'm already happy with who I'm using at the moment. They're locally based. I know who I'm speaking to. I've got a face to the name. And again, it's that trust piece. So I would really recommend just building the trust within the country first, really doing your research, speaking to customers, but also other potential partners and other businesses, and then going from there.
That's great advice, actually. Sebastian, within AECF, is that something that you look into, this market linkages and having your SMEs that you fund kind of venturing overseas?
Yes, certainly, Anu. And this is one I can give a very clear example. In Tanzania recently, and working with you guys, you sort of linked one of our investees. You know, we call them investees, but basically they received our grant money, and you link them to external funding. You know, your work just making sure that the investment readiness and investment facilitation process adheres to all those internationally known standards, then allows them to tap into those markets. So it's something we're looking at, which is incidentally, we're looking at an AECF credit ourselves, where we will actually transition some of these businesses from the grant funding to, you know, to the pure credit commercial lines. But it's something we do. Increasingly, we are focusing a lot on structuring, you know, our grantees in a way that they attract the attention of commercial capital from outside Africa and other markets. Thank you.
That's great. It's great to know. We're kind of coming up to the end of the panelist session. If the audience have any questions, please do put them into the Q&A box. Just the final question for the group, if we quickly go around, is basically, if there was one practical advice that you could give missing middle SME, one thing that they can do to really change their business, what would it be? If we start with you, George, is there one thing that an SME can do to change and grow their business?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, the most important thing that I would propose to the SMEs is about having a very clear business plan. And as I said, being one of the key challenges that you know, we face when we are interacting with the business plans. I mean, with business, SME business. But importantly, I think, and even if it means an SME investing, you know, on a consultancy to support them in structuring their business in a way that the corporate as a governance aspect does not bring them down, because other issues can be dealt with, you know, with the parties at arm's length and such. But when it comes to issues of social and family aspects. Other business partners may not be able to step in to support, but if they are able to separate the businesses from the family aspect, very, very important, and create a very it helps them to create a very good succession aspect or succession plan. So for me, if you ask me, those are the two key things that I would say, of course, among many others, but those for me will be the key that I would want to recommend to SMEs to be able to deal with. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Keith, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, if there were one thing, I would probably say it would be open, transparent communication, because we're all impact investors here. We're all interested in supporting these social enterprises to grow and succeed. But we need the honest communication as well. I haven't found any challenge, well, maybe except the currency fluctuation that's has higher market forces at play there. But beyond that, there are usually solutions that can be found to most of the business challenges out there. But the good, clear, open communication, similar to what you were saying, Sarah, it's difficult when someone's just talking to you and they're locked into what they're thinking, but at the pre-financing phase, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of problem solving to be done. Like you mentioned, Sebastian, it's cash flow based. So we can structure financing in innumerable different ways to find a solution. But that communication needs to be there. So I would say that, Anna, because then that covers everything. How you plan out your management structure, how you plan out your financial reporting system, market research, business planning, everything. But it's that communication, I think, which is really key.
I totally agree. Brilliant. And Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? If there's one thing that you could suggest?
Yeah, I think I was going to say communication, but I think another great one is being agile. So, making sure that if you're going to have a small team, which I think is often the right way for a lot of businesses, hire the right people. So don't make that mistake, which is obviously quite a difficult thing to do. Make those quick decisions, but make sure they're thoughtful. So, you can't spend too long on things if you really are trying to grow quickly. But at the same time, you don't want to rush into bad decisions. So it's thoughtful, but quick decisions, being flexible. The markets can change so quickly. So if you're agile and you can be flexible with those markets, then you're bound to be a bit more robust. So yeah, I would say being agile is probably my key point.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Sebastian, what would be the one thing?
I would say, in addition to all of the above, integrity is so important for me. Because if you have the right integrity, it means you'll attract the right professionals, to work for you. You will know where your plan is. Your customers will trust you. Your banker will trust you. It will just make your work so much easier. If you say you cannot do it, say you cannot do it. If you can do it, do it. It will just open doors for you. And that integrity will be reflective in your financials. It will be reflective in how you deal with consultants who you must work with, and it will be reflective in your relationship with your financial institution, even if it's a grant funder. Thank you.
I totally agree, Sebastian. I think the reputation that comes from that high integrity just goes the longest way possible. Thank you so much, everybody. I think thank you so much to the panel. That was amazing insights, and I think we've just learned so much from just speaking to you all for this past couple of minutes. So just to summarize, I think overarchingly the main ideas were for agribusinesses to have good kind of structure, solid structure. Profits are not always the main thing. Cash flow is always king. This transparency and integrity is also very, very essential. And I think in this current environment, it's so important to think about the risks and problems that might arise by these world events that are happening. It's good to have mitigative steps in place. Obviously, Keith mentioned the inflation and currency issue being one of them. So these are all very important things to think about. And finally, always think about the customer and think about how your financials are going to speak to the investor and also how you come across to the customer in terms of your marketing. So thank you so much. It was really, really enlightening. Thank you so much to the panel. So we have a Q&A session now. So we have one question, but I can see George is typing an answer. So we will let George. The question is, thank you for the insightful panel session. I have a question for George. What are your lending rates? So I think this is probably a question for George. Would you like to answer that in person, or would you like to type the answer, George?
No, I can answer in person, and thank you for the participant who has asked that question. The current financing rate is at 13%, and we definitely based also on what level of financing an SME would be taking. Those are numbers that can always be discussed, because again, if it's a large SME asking for a facility, and also based also on the nature of investment they want to do, then we are able to see how we can be able to also slightly down. But the standard, if you ask from a standard perspective, it's now 13%.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you. We have another question. Are there specific agricultural value chains that you find more favorable to fund in the continent? So Keith has replied, and he said plant and livestock protein value chains is one example. But Keith, why do you find that quite favorable?
Oh, right. It's just from experience. We see it across the continent with the huge demand from the growing middle class. There's more demand for protein crops, livestock products, particularly poultry, pork, some of the lower cost proteins. There's huge demand there, and fairly simple businesses to project out, run, and to be successful at.
Sebastian, is there a specific value chain that you would like you focus on from AECF?
No, that's the interesting thing. AECF is fairly value chain agnostic, unless the development financier requires, a work in specific value chains. In Tanzania, for example, we did over 10 value chains. In South Sudan, we're doing 6. In other markets, we're not even asking whatever value chain it is, as long as the solution that a business is bringing to the market is solving a very clear problem in agribusiness. In any value chain, we will fund it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Duncan, that's great. Thank you so much for the insightful session. Are there the commercial lenders and impact investors addressing an unanticipated risks like COVID, which disrupted a lot of SMEs and revenue streams? How are the commercial lenders and impact investors? So maybe we can start with George. In terms of commercial lending, how have you managed this unanticipated risks?
Thank you. I think I can just revisit that I made earlier, and thanks for that question, where I said that we realized as equity that there are major challenges that have really faced businesses post-COVID. And if I would first of all say what we did, the response that we gave at the beginning when COVID struck, it was about understanding what kind of impact it would have, was potentially posing to businesses. And for that reason, we decided to restructure all businesses based on the sectors that they were operating. Happily, I would say that most of the agribusiness related ventures were able to bounce back thanks to the fact that people continued to eat and to consume agricultural produce. But thereafter, and this is what informed our, the launch of our Marshall Plan, Africa Marshall Plan, which I spoke about earlier. At the beginning of this year, we looked at it and we had to develop, the resilience plan and recovery plan. For support of businesses. We've set aside 700 billion shillings equivalent as a group to be able to support businesses to the structures that can actually be able to, withstand such kind of shocks, as I said earlier. And most importantly, then narrowed or zoomed down to specific sectors. And it would be interesting to note that at the food and agriculture sector, we've also narrowed down to specific value chains that we really are keen in supporting going forward, so that then agribusinesses can actually be able to do businesses that we see have a great future, but also that can actually be able to help them to grow and expand. So I think that's the approach that we have taken post-COVID. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is that something similar, Keith, that you have as an impact investor? Do you see that also?
Well, for COVID, we moved quite quickly. I remember March 2020, and we moved quickly in April 2020 and gave an option. We did two things. We gave an option of restructuring and give a 1-year grace period on all payments to all of our borrowers. Interestingly, only 33% of the borrowers took that offer up, but we also offered 5,000 to 10,000 USD one-time grant for COVID hygienic materials, masks, washing stations, things like that, as well as part of that money was for salaries to keep people on board when there was that 4 to 6 months of really decreased revenue. So that's what we did. But interestingly, our borrowers, most of them chose not to take the restructuring option.
In terms of the inflation and currency fluctuations that you're talking about, so that's obviously due to the world issues. Is there something that you have been putting in place to manage those kind of risks and problems?
Yes, we do USD loans. So we do have a hedging service that we use. So we can give local hedge loans. So it's a fixed term loan repayment in local currency. But those can be expensive too. So that's not a great solution unless you get to very large loans, shorter tenures. If you're doing longer term loans like we do, probably like you do, Sebastian, 5, 6, 7 year loans, particularly in ag space, particularly in a place like Nigeria, it gets very, very difficult. And to be honest, there aren't any good solutions out there. What we're doing now is trying to raise a currency risk facility to cover up to 8 to 10% of currency fluctuation. That would have to be subsidized, grant-based, but there aren't clear solutions out there. I don't know your experience, Sebastian, but that's what we find.
It's very interesting you mentioned currency risk, Keith. It's also a problem because all our grants, majority of our grants are denominated in US dollars, and you know how the market has been. Yeah. So I'm actually, we should reach out to you, Keith, and talk about your currency risk strategy. Who knows? but it's a clear problem for us. No solution so far, but let's see how that goes.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that question, Duncan. So we have another question. How many value chains is AECF involved in Africa, in Nigeria specifically? And Sebastian has replied, when the investing in women in Nigeria kicks off early next year, will be in rice, sesame, groundnuts, wheat, and cassava. So this is only for the Kano state. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Sebastian? Or?
Yes, something else I would like to add is I think I mentioned that sometimes our donors, in this case, Global Affairs Canada, limits us to who we can lend to and what we can do. So in this particular case, they limited us to investing in women only. So it's going to be focused on women-owned or women-focused businesses, and only in Kano State. So in the past, AECF, and our preference really is just to have the entire country and have solutions come from the private sector. But in this case, we are limited to those value chains. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from you when we launch the program, early next year. Yeah, first quarter, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Sounds like a very interesting program, even though it's very specific. I think it's very it's important to the core of that state, I think, to have that kind of support. So very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. We had one more question from Sylvia. So she's in the aggregation and produce marketing, and we need to structure. So Sylvia, we will definitely get in touch with you, because I think this is something that we can help with. We do have experience in Ghana, and we've done some projects prior to this, so we will get in touch with you. So I think that's all we have time for today, actually. And thank you so much to the attendees for sending through those very interesting questions. I think we had a good time discussing and coming up with those answers. If you do have any more questions to the attendees, please feel free to send through questions to us at hello@agrigrowthhub.com, and we will be happy to help you there. Thank you to our panel, and to take the time to come and speak to us today is really nice. So thank you so much. And if nothing else, I think the panel has just reinforced one thing, that we just need more support within the missing middle SME space. And we're all here to help. So obviously, gaining investment is crucial to the growth of any business, and therefore I think we need to be very prepared. Investors obviously look for companies, like we spoke about, companies that are very structured, make sure they have the detailed plans in place, and the execution is also very important. So we at Agri believe that there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's only bad execution and bad planning. So this is where all our organizations and all the panelists come into play. And also Agri, the Growth Hub, that's what we're there for, to help you execute, launch, and scale and grow your business. So with that, I'd like to thank all our panelists today again. Thank you, George. Sarah's gone because of a fire alarm, but thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Keith. We really thank you for your time today, and thanks to the team for organizing this. It was really good. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And on behalf of Agri, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
So Victor, if you're still on the line, you can email us at hello@agrigrowthhub.com, or you can give us a call, whichever that's easier for you. think we can end the webinar now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.